All right, I just wanted to make this video in order to show folks who haven't had much experience with GitHub how to clone a repository and then like add their own files to the repository. So somewhere on the internet on GitHub, you should have a repository that you're trying to work in. And if you navigate to that, there'll be this green code button. And there's two choices here that will work. You can either copy this HTTPS URL here, or you can click open with GitHub Desktop. Now, if you don't have GitHub Desktop, this is my recommended GUI interface for Git. And if you go to desktop.github.com, you can download it. It should be pretty straightforward to install. And eventually it'll ask you like to clone a repository, and then that's when this comes in. So you can either copy this URL and then go into GitHub Desktop and choose clone repository and make sure you have the URL tab selected here and then paste it in. That would work. I guess I would say be very intentional about where you decide to clone it locally. So just make sure you selected a location that makes sense for you, and you can, change it to wherever you want. This part is going to be added. This is the name of the repository. You should leave that be. That's the folder that it's going to go into inside of wherever you decide to locate the project. And then, so before I clone it, I guess I'll just show you the other way. If you were to click the green code button and then choose open with GitHub Desktop, you may get a Windows permissions thing that says, do you want to associate this link with this kind of behavior, which would be opening it with this app, GitHub Desktop. And I would say, yeah. And it's just a shortcut to bring this thing open. So I'm going to go ahead and hit clone. And it's important to understand that you only need to clone a repository once per machine that you're working on. So now that this computer I'm working on has the repository cloned, I don't need to ever do that again in my workflow here. Instead, what my new workflow should be is before I start working for the day, is I will make sure I have the current repository selected in this drop down that that corresponds with the project I'm working on. And then I'm going to click this fetch button, or sometimes it might say pull. And that's just going to get my local copy that I cloned in sync with the updated version that other developers might be making commits to since I've last synchronized my working copy on my computer. And so once I know I'm up to date, the next thing I'm going to do is open my project and do some work. And there's two pretty useful shortcuts I just want to call out. One, if you choose this repository menu, you can choose Show and Explore, and that will open a File Explorer window directly to the location where your project is cloned. So if it's like a Unity project, you'll see the project here. It'll have an assets directory and then all the other directories that make up the Unity project, or it could be whatever kind of project you're working on. But it's just an easy way to find the project if you forget where you cloned it. And it's, I guess, something I see go wrong a lot is people will have multiple copies of the project in different spots on their computer, and it's just good to understand exactly where the files you're working on are associated with this repository. So this will clarify that. And then the other option I like on this repository menu is View on GitHub, which will just open it up, and you can, if there's any doubt about what repository you're connected to here, this will clarify it. You can see what the commits are, to see what your team has been up to lately, whatever you might need to see on the repository, or if you're doing project management on the repo tools on GitHub. On GitHub, you can check, issues or look at your wiki or your project board or whatever, and that's just an easy way to get to it from the GitHub Desktop app. All right, so now the question is like, how do I add new things to the repository? So we know how to find where the project is on my hard drive. So I'm just going to make a new file real quick by right-clicking and selecting new text document, and I'll just call it test file. And I guess I can give it some content just for fun. I just opened it in a text editor, and I will just put some little message in and save it. And now that I've changed files on my project, if I were to go back to GitHub Desktop, you're going to see on the Changes tab here, it's going to show what has changed. And specifically, I guess now that okay, so you'll see the green plus next to this file. If you've changed many files, you'll see them all listed. The green plus indicates that it's a new file that you've just added. Otherwise, you could see a yellow icon that means something's changed, or a red icon indicates that you're removing or deleting a file from the repository. So you can kind of see at a glance what's what, and then if you click on a file, you will see the contents of that file and what changed. So that's pretty useful for text files, but if you're working on like an audio clip or a image file, a little less useful. The important thing here to note is that if there's stuff in this list of changed files that you don't understand, you should uncheck them, because we don't want to make changes to the project that weren't intentional. And basically, sometimes, even though you don't understand how it got here, it is supposed to be there, and sometimes it's not. And so it's just good to check in with other people on your team, or if you have a teacher, you can ask them what these files you don't understand might be before you just start committing stuff. So this is what I intended to do, add this one file here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it checked. You can selectively, if there are more than one thing in this list, you can check some of them and uncheck others. And I'm going to make a nice note here. I want to type something because it's just good to get in that habit, and I want to show that in the video. But honestly, this default message they've left for me here is about as good as I could come up with. But I'll just say add a test file for my video demonstration. And it's really important to leave good commit notes, and if it starts to get too long, you can put some extra description in here. These commit messages are important because if you're trying to go through your list of commits and kind of find a specific change, if you don't have good messages here, you will have a difficult time understanding where a new problem got introduced, or where an old file you're looking for might still exist, or something like that. It just gives you a good record of the history of the development of your project also. So I'll go ahead and next I hit commit. And what that does is it adds a commit on my local copy of the project. So I can see it in my history now. But if I were to go look at this on GitHub and I look at the commits, that new commit is not present. And that's because the way Git works is, in addition to making a commit, you have to push the commit to the repository on wherever it's hosted, which they call origin here. It means we're going to push this commit that I made to the cloud, and then it will show up on the GitHub website. So I can go ahead and do that and hit push, and it uploads the file. If it's like a lot of files that are large disk sizes, it might take a minute to upload. And Now, if I were to refresh this, there should be 2 commits. And you can see we're starting to build this history of the development of our project through the nice commit notes that we are leaving. So that's the basics. To summarize, you clone the first time you want to copy the project onto your local computer from the cloud. You only have to do that once. Then you just open GitHub Desktop and you can just make sure you hit fetch or pull in order to get the latest changes that other developers might have made before you start working. If you don't do that, you can get into a conflict state, which can be tricky to resolve. And then you do your work and you make commits. You should make commits fairly frequently based on whenever you've accomplished a task or you have to stop working for the day. And then you should make sure you remember to push your commits so that other developers can get them when they synchronize. And that's the long and short of it. Hopefully this is helpful.